Test 1, 2, 3. Your seats, please. We'll get started. Is this thing on?
I'm not sure that. Did you hear that?
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Administration and Finance Committee meeting on August the 15th, 2023. I will now call on Reid, Committee Clerk, to conduct the roll call. Reid.
Regional Chair Redmond. Present. Councillor Craig.
Present.
Councillor Deutschmann. Present. Councillor Erb. Councillor Foxton. Present. Chair Harris. Present. Councillor Hunick.
Present.
Councillor James.
Present.
Councillor Liggett.
Present.
Councillor McCabe. Present. Councillor Nowak.
Present.
Councillor Salonen.
Present.
Councillor Shantz.
Present.
Councillor Verbanovic.
Present.
Councillor Williams.
Present.
Councillor Wolf.
Present.
Thank you. I would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Nutra people. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements, and their contributions to our community. I would now like to take a moment of silence in the memory of Councilor of Cambridge, Councilor Donna Reid, who recently passed. If you are able to, please stand as we take that moment of silence. Thank you. I would like to now move to the regular, before I like to move to the regular business agenda, I would like to call on Regional Chair Redmond to make some remarks. Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair Harris, and I will be brief because I know how many people around this horseshoe have worked with Councilor Reid and have a personal story and relationship that goes back years. On behalf of Regional Council, I want to extend my deepest condolences to Donna's family, friends, current and former colleagues, including Councillors Craig, Leggett, and Wolf, who have worked extensively and closely with Donna over the years. Councillor Reid's decades of service as an educator, not-for-profit leader, and councillor reflect an admirable love of her community. She leaves a legacy of passion for Cambridge and of standing up for marginalized people. She was steadfast in living her convictions and giving voice to the concerns of residents. You could never question Donna's motivations or where she stood on an issue. You knew she was always focused on what was best for residents. We are so fortunate to have benefited from her service, her empathy, and her contributions. For that, Cambridge and this region is a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Redmond. I'd like to call upon Jan. Jan, are you speaking next? Jan? Councillor Leggett.
Thank you, Chair. I asked to speak as mayor of the city versus as a regional councillor to represent the people of the community as well as city council. Anyone who knew Donna knew that she had strong beliefs and was a very fierce advocate for those she felt needed her protection. I had a lot of respect for her strength and principles, even when many times we were of differing opinions. She was the type of advocate everyone could only wish to have in their corner, fully embracing any backlash that might come her way. She focused her life work on social issues for which she made great change. And aside for the legacy of her family, it is most likely the community and the career legacy she wished to leave behind, and she accomplished that in spades. Donna made a great difference to the lives that she touched on the road that she traveled through life. One of the things that she did that will have has had long repercussions since she came into, in positive repercussions since she came on council, was she made it a goal to increase the quantity of women that were in management roles at the city, and she achieved that. We have deputy city managers, many directors and managers and supervisors who are now females, and it's all because of her. So I think that is a legacy that is admirable for any one of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Liggett. Councillor Wolf.
Thank you. Donna was one of my closest friends for more than 35 years. She was my mentor and my rock. Donna was a vibrant leader who inspired so many women, including myself, to become leaders. Because Donna believed in you, you began to believe in yourself. I first met Donna when she was the executive director for the Women Teachers Federation, and I was having problems with my maternity leave. Donna encouraged me to become a steward for my school, and we worked together to write an information booklet to help women who were going on maternity leave. In my political career, Donna was with me every step of the way. Donna had me join the Status of Women Committee and later chair it, join the Women Teachers Executive and later the ATFO Executive as equity rep. She had me run twice for the NDP and then run for Cambridge City Council. Whenever Donna would call, my husband would plead with her, "Donna, don't ask her to do anything else. We have 3 children to raise." Without Donna's support and example, I would never have entered politics. Donna encouraged so many women like myself to step up. There was no stopping Donna. I was so privileged to work with her on many projects and committees, and we spent 12 years together on City Council. Donna was an articulate and principled councillor who stood up for what she believed, and she worked tirelessly for her community. Over the years, these works have been recognized. Donna was one of the first YWCA Women of Distinction, and she was an honorary lifetime member of the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario, just 2 of the awards she received. Donna recently won an award of distinction from the Retired Teachers of Ontario. Over the years, she sat on several boards, including Women's Crisis Services, Planned Parenthood, and the United Way. One accomplishment Donna was very proud of was the Red Rose campaign and the button that she initiated to commemorate the murders of the 14 young women in Montreal. This campaign then went national. Donna ran for the NDP in Cambridge in 2010, and she worked on so many campaigns. Today, I received condolences from Mayor Andrea Horvath and several other NDP colleagues expressing their condolences and appreciation to this social activist. As a Cambridge City Councillor, Donna supported Living Wage, the Rainbow Crosswalk, and a CTS in Cambridge. She initiated city funding to partner with other groups to celebrate International Women's Day and Persons Day, and spearheaded an age-friendly city. There are so many more things Donna did to make the community a better place to live. Throughout her life, she worked to promote women, diversity, inclusion, and equity. Donna did this with strength, courage, and integrity. We will all remember Donna, too, for being impeccably dressed, wear bright colors, her red hair, and amazing jewelry. Donna had a vibrancy and style that made her stand out and sparkle. We are going to miss this wonderful woman very much, and I invite you all to a celebration of her life this Friday afternoon from 2 to 5 in the Bowman Room at Cambridge City Hall. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wolf. Councillor Craig.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, it's unfortunate we end up praising people when they're not here. And it's kind of sad from that point of view. But there are many things that come to mind when I think of Dawn. And we were good friends over the years. And I saw her last Thursday for the last time. We had a nice chat, talked about things in general and past accomplishments, past conflicts on council, and where the community was in terms of progressive new policies that were put in place. She was part of, when I was mayor, my NDP, the NDP contingent on council with Pam, who are always nipping at my heels on a daily basis, trying to get specific policies passed. And there was a great consistency about that. when it wasn't the popular thing to talk about, like the pride flag. We were out in front of City Hall years ago, and I think we were the first to put up a pride flag with about 10 other people in attendance that day. Donna and Pam were there. Also, when it came to hiring a new officiant at City Hall, she made it very clear that it had to be an officiant that would, in fact, marry people of all sexes, and that was to be part of who we were. And again, that sort of broke ground at the time. And it was somewhat controversial, but it was something that didn't sway her in terms of the things that she believed in, things she wanted. As Pam has said, she was a strong supporter of women's issues, of vulnerable groups within the city of Cambridge, and she worked at that continually. So what do I remember in particular was the way she dressed at times, very sort of a different way, very much of a flair, all of that sort of thing. And I did something a few years ago that I've never done, even for my wife. I bought her something that she could carry. So, and actually, Sue brought the same size today. I bought her a purse. And it was essentially this size right here. And it had a big clock in the middle of it, right out of Alice in Wonderland, a clock that actually worked. And I bought it just for fun because I knew her very well. Well, I didn't expect her to carry it around the community, which she did. So that's who Donna was. She had great strength, a great sense of humor, a strong, strong supporter of Cambridge and of me at the time when I was mayor. And I always remember that. And again, I come back to Thursday, and I said to her, my last parting words, I said, I'm going to come back, but I'm going to do something I've never done before. I'm going to kiss you goodbye, which I did. And I'm glad I did that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Craig. Councillor Foxton.
Thank you. You knew when Donna walked in the room. If she walked in right now, all our eyes would go towards her and we'd smile because she walked in and she vibrated. She shone. Her passion, her beliefs, and her acceptance of all. You just felt accepted. You ever met somebody where you just felt like you were a part of, like you were accepted and you were okay? And we need more like her. She was so dedicated to the people, all people. Didn't matter if it was just Cambridge, sorry, Jan. All people she cared about. She cared passionately about life and people within life. And she lived every moment to the max. So I can never be sorry. I'm sorry she's gone, but I'm so pleased that she lived to the max, to the fullest. May we all learn from that, to live to the max, to the fullest, and to do as much as we can, all that can. And do it now. Don't wait for tomorrow. But Donna, thanks a lot. You taught us a lot.
Thank you, Councillor Foxton. Councillor James.
Yeah, I just want to say a few words. Donna's, Councillor Reid's support with the Women's Municipal Campaign School and her involvement in that, especially being part of that through the last municipal election. She was instrumental. Her voice was well received around. She was, as fellow colleagues have said, just passionate about equity, diversity, and inclusion, and especially encouraging women to run in municipal politics. So she will be missed, but I definitely wanted to recognize the important part she played in the campaign school throughout her years as councillor.
Thank you, Councillor James. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, there are no presentations. We do have a delegation, I believe. Is Nate Whalen from Cambridge here? Nate Whalen? Give him a minute. Nate Whalen. Not online? Nope. Give him a minute or so. Nope. No Nate Whalen is here. So I'm going to move on to the consent agenda. If you wish to remove an item from the consent agenda, please indicate so now, as we will not take questions on consent items unless items are requested to be moved to the regular agenda. The items listed on the consent agenda will be dealt with in one motion. Are there, in fact, any items that you wish to have removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none, we will now vote to receive and approve the consent agenda items. Moved by Councilor Foxton, seconded by Councilor Salonen. Please use your yes or no button to vote in eScribe. Yes, Councilor Leggett. And that appears to be, oh. Okay. Passed or moved. I'd like to move now to the regular agenda, 7.1, strategic focus, thriving economy. I'll call on Connie McDonald, Chief Communications and Strategy Officer, to introduce the report. Connie, good morning.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair Harris. The mid-year report provides an update on our achievements, risks, and a financial update for the second quarter of 2023. Overall, our municipality has performed well during the first half of 2023. We've made progress in each of our strategic priority areas, and there's a few of those summarized in the report. I'd like to share just a few highlights and also acknowledge that I have the great privilege of sharing these achievements, but they really reflect the work of every single person at the region of Waterloo and our partners. And I'm really grateful that I get to highlight all the good work that my colleagues do. The region set a target of 2,500 new affordable housing units in 5 years through the Building Better Futures plan. We're halfway through, and we've reached 73% of this goal, with 1,825 new affordable homes now in development or occupied. We've been able to expand paramedic services, resulting in 2 new 24-hour units and 17,520 additional hours of coverage a year. We're really proud of the fact that GRT ridership has recovered so well from the pandemic, with a 63.5% increase in ridership this year compared to last year. I know we've seen many people out and about on e-bikes and e-scooters. There have been 500 e-bikes and 500 e-scooters that were made available for community members to rent, and they've logged over 250,000 kilometers traveled since April. We're prioritizing energy use reductions and energy efficiencies at the airport, making improvements to our drinking water sites, and so much more. Again, these achievements are made possible through the dedicated employees of the region. We're not reporting any significant risks to plan achievement at the mid-year point of the year, but do want to highlight that we continue to face recruitment and retention challenges, particularly related to a number of factors, including compensation pressures as we lose staff to other sectors and other municipalities. This makes it a little bit more difficult for our staff to maintain the pace of initiatives and service delivery, but again, reporting significant achievements at this point in the year. I'll pass it over to my colleague, Commissioner Dyer, to provide an update on the financials.
Thank you, Connie. So included in through the chair, included in the mid-year report is an update on the region's financial position through the first 2 quarters of this year. And this is an opportunity for us to provide a projection to where we think things might land at year end, recognizing that we still have a sizable amount of the year remaining. Our projections at this point suggest that we're going to be very close to budget. A minor surplus is currently being projected in the range of $500,000. And overall, and this is the result of a number of offsetting, largely offsetting variances. So we're seeing, for example, to Connie's point with respect to transit, we're seeing transit fare revenues being higher than budget. for a number of reasons, largely related to UPass sales and higher student enrollment. Airport fees are slightly below budget, but again, a relatively minor variance in the grand scheme of our $1.5 billion operating budget. We are seeing some challenges with respect to some of our facility costs. You may recall that during the 2023 budget, there were a number of base budget adjustments that were made within facilities. It would appear that some of those reductions may have been a little too aggressive, so we're looking on managing those variances to the best of our ability this year. There may be the need for certain adjustments to be made in 2024. And then finally, regional development charge exemptions are currently running higher than budget. We've seen it's been a very strong year for development charge collections and building activity here in the region. We've also seen an uptick in the number of discounts that are provided, and this is primarily related to the 60% industrial discount that's within our bylaw. But overall, we're seeing, again, just a projection for a small variance, a small positive variance at year end. Water and wastewater both generally looking good. Revenues slightly above budget and expenditures slightly below budget, again with some challenges from a development charge exemption funding perspective. There is a recommendation to make a minor adjustment to the funding of one of our transportation projects, which is outlined in Appendix D. And basically, the original sources of funding were the Transportation Capital Reserve and the Community Building Fund. It's been determined that that project is actually more appropriately funded from development charges, so a recommendation to amend the funding of that project is in the report. And then finally, we've included for Council's review a summary of some of the reports and decisions that have been made over the course of this year that have implications either within 2023 or within 2024 budget. And to the extent that they impact 2024, we're busy putting those together as part of our preliminary 2024 operating budget. And with that, I'll turn it back to the chair. Thank you.
Councilor Hunek has a question.
Through the chair, my question was answered by Mr. Dyer. Thank you.
Okay. I don't have anybody else on the... Oh, Councilor Deutschman.
Thank you. I apologize. Month off, so maybe keep me rusty with my e-scribe skills. Okay. So, just trying to find the spot here.
Perhaps we'll go to Councilor Shantz. We'll come back
Yeah,
to you, Deutschman.
that'd be great. Thank
okay,
you.
Councilor Shantz.
Thank you. One of the comments that Connie made about e-scooters, excuse me, is prompting me to ask what are we doing to make sure that people are using our bike trails, our trails in a safe way? Because I've seen a lot of issues where, particularly with the electronic vehicles, they're being used in a dangerous way, and it's difficult for car drivers to know how to deal with that. So are we doing anything to help with education of both car drivers and users of our trails?
I'll pass that over to Matthew, perhaps.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Shantz. So there's several things I would say with our provider. There's been extensive work on, well, first overall, the e-bikes and e-scooters are capped at speeds that are around 20 kilometers per hour. So they're actually lower than a lot of the private owned e-bikes and e-scooters. So I would say, you know, for these 1,000 e-bikes and e-scooters that are running in our community, that's already a protection, because that difference in speed between walkers, for example, and regular cyclists and e-bikes, that's one of the causes of conflict. So that's one way of managing it. Today, also on these on these e-scooters and e-bikes, the geofencing is protecting, so it is disabling the electric assist right now, and so it does pose a few problems. So I know there's some adjustments that are happening right now with the operator, but today they're disabled on some of the multi-use trails to manage these conflicts a little bit better, and these are things that we'll continue to fine tune and look into. We know that since the beginning of the operations of this program, actually, we've had very few, I think just 1 or 2 collisions with e-bikes and e-scooters. So I would say from a safety perspective, the impacts are very positive. And more broadly, I think there's always work with all of the cities on the e-scooter and e-bike regulations around trails, multi-use trails, and bike lanes to fine tune that. And we're still waiting on MTO on some definitions of e-bikes. We think that will help us also to have a much more kind of granular regulation of because we know that between an e-bike that can travel 35 kilometers an hour and one that's capped at 20, that's very different, and the risk is very different. So MTO has been working on the categorization of e-bikes for some time, and we're still waiting for these categories to come out. And after that, we'll be able to adjust our regulations to make sure that safety is ensured for all of the users and all vehicles crossing multi-use trails as well.
Okay. Thank you. Councilor Deutschmann.
That's all right.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So a few questions. With respect to, there's a reference to, on the gasoline estimate, and it says, as a result, it's estimated that budgeted TSR funding is likely not required. What was the amount of the TSR funding that was anticipated? And the TSR tax stabilization reserve.
So through the chair, the budgeted funding from tax stabilization reserve relating to the fuel price increase was $3.5 million.
$3.5 million?
Correct.
So in the last budget, we said we may have to draw on TSR for $3.5 million because of potential anticipated gas pricing, but it hasn't reached that level, and so we don't need to use those funds.
At this point, that is our projection. That being said, fuel price activity over the last month or so, certainly since we wrote this report, fuel prices are on their way up. So it's something that we'll monitor. We'll report back again as part of the Q3 report. But at this point, we think, we don't think that the majority of that $3.5 million will be needed in 2023.
Okay, thank you. With respect to 2 new bylaw enforcement officers, do we know what, was there a previous report that said what they're going to be doing or what the purpose is? I see it's in connection with encampment policy and enforcement, so I'm just curious about that.
I'll turn over to Will Short.
Sorry, I wasn't prepared. Peter can speak to it as well. Yep, go ahead. I don't recall whether there was a specific report to answer your first question related to this, but specifically this is an adjustment mid-year to support that team in the additional work that is coming with supporting the 2 large encampments on regional property through a human rights lens to make sure that we have the staff to be able to be there on a daily basis, both on the social services side, which is in the budget, and on the bylaw side as well.
So are we going to have a chance to have a discussion about whether we need 2 new bylaw enforcement officers or 2 new outreach workers working in the community, or what role are these people going to be playing? Because I've had lots of conversations with people about the King Street shelter, talking to a variety of service providers and others, WRPS, Working Center, neighbors, social workers. So that stuck out to me when I saw that in relation to this, because I'm hoping we're going to have an opportunity to have a discussion about that, about what is happening in that area and what you and your team might be proposing that we should consider doing going forward, because we definitely have issues not only there but at 150 as well that needs to be looked at, and making sure that we're putting the right people in place to deal with those issues.
Yeah, so the topic is similar, but the work that these two particular staff are doing are not necessarily tied to the King Street shelter. Almost all of this is driven by the ongoing daily support at 100 Victoria and 150 Main. It's the encampment piece more than, so this isn't related to security in our partnership with the Working Centre King Street at all. These staff would rarely be involved in that work. So they're related on topic, but they're different, distinct. And to answer your second question, all of this was to be done to support sort of workload mid-year, and all of it will be coming back through the 2024 budget in terms of how we're going to propose to support encampments, but also the shelter system and some of the issues that we've seen in some of our neighborhoods. So just to be clear, they're related, but they're different. It's not specifically related to King Street.
Well, I hope we have a more fulsome conversation on this at another time.
For sure.
Are these two going to be hired anytime soon, or this is part of the 2024 budget? I just want to confirm that.
If I could just, so these folks are going to report up to Will, so if I could just turn it over to Will on the particulars, that would be.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry,
It's a team effort here.
Yeah, sorry. So just on the need for the two bylaw officers, separate from what Peter was just talking about, the encampment duties have taken on so much time for the bylaw team that we had in place that they weren't able to deal with other issues that bylaw officers need to be dealing with on a daily basis. So that was the need for the additional two bylaw officers there. And the manager, Thomas Hudason, is actually working with HR to go through the recruitment process on those as we speak.
All right. I appreciate all of that, and I understand the concerns that are occurring and hearing about them quite a bit. And we definitely need to do something to see what we can do to address the issues and the concerns in the most appropriate manner possible. Thank you.
I believe Mr. Lochner also wants to chime in.
Yeah, just to add to Councillor Deutschman's comments, yes, we agree, and we'll have this as a clear topic on the 2024 budget discussion.
Councillor McCabe.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I have a question about the airport, but before I do that, I just wanted to pick up on Councillor Chance's point about Nearon and just reflect that I think that program has been really very successful despite taking, and it's not the region particularly, but I think the local municipalities, I know certainly at the city of Waterloo, what has been described as a very conservative approach in terms of where these vehicles are allowed to operate. And in my use of them, I've found it, and I've shared with Nearon, somewhat frustrating because sometimes the ride ends where you're like, why is it ending here? It doesn't really make, when you look at it from a map, it didn't really make intuitive sense. And particularly, to your point, Mayor Shantz, there's some bylaws that need to be looked at the lower tier for for the trails and that kind of stuff. If we are to continue with this program, which I hope we are, and I think there certainly has been successful, so I hope that we are. But particularly the parking, where you can park and leave these, I think has been far too restrictive and has just created some challenges. So that's certainly something that I hope when we get an update on this report or we look at it for next year that we take a look at that, because those are some of the things that I've flagged. But my question also is just around the airport, which I know is something that we've brought up a few different times. And while I can appreciate that our airport is now, I think, has the top 20th busiest airport, I always feel incumbent that it's necessary to remind ourselves that every takeoff and landing is a significant contributor of carbon to the atmosphere, because we know that airplanes emit about 100 times more CO2 per hour than a bus or a train ride, and that every flight that we can avoid saves the equivalent of driving a gasoline vehicle for a year. So while I get the juxtaposition we're in about wanting to have a successful airport, success also means that we're continually contributing significant amounts of carbon to the atmosphere. So I know that's something that we need to continue to wrestle with. And I know that we're working with the Waterloo Institute of Sustainable Aviation. I don't know when when we can practically think that electric airplanes are going to be the primary source of flights in and out of our airport. So two things I would ask us to be mindful of that, but also to ask what the timeline is for the master plan update and sustainability strategy to be in place, because I think we really need to take a really serious look at that and to understand what the airline companies are doing, and how the region, how we can push them to do more to reduce their carbon input, and what we should be doing to say, well, if you are taking a flight, think about carbon offsets, like purchase carbon offsets. They're not incredibly expensive or anything like that. So when is that master plan, that sustainability master plan strategy supposed to be in place? And I guess I just want to note that I think this is something that we really need to think very deeply about and urgently about.
Will you respond? Rod, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Harris. Just a quick update on the master planning process. We are consolidating the draft master plan for discussion with Council. We hope to bring it back to Council for conversation and the launch of a bit of a community engagement process in the fall. So I'm thinking right now probably the earliest would be October, the October cycle of Council, but probably November is more likely given the considerable amount of work that needs to be done on the document at this stage. So yes, certainly the questions of sustainability and our sustainability strategy will be central to the master planning, the master plan for the airport, and it's a matter of significant concern and a focus for this piece of work.
Councilor Erb.
Thank you, Chair Harris. Thanks for this report and for highlighting some of the positive things that have been happening in the region. I'm assuming just on the scooters that we're probably going to have a report and the provider coming back to Council at the end of the contract period. But in the meantime, I just like to say that any contact that I've had with Neuron related to any issues or anything in the community, they've just been excellent at responding. And I'm really, really grateful for the customer service, I think we would call it, that they've been providing back. And so I want, if we can pass that on to them, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity to share that with them personally at the end of the season. A question to Mr. Dyer on the projected surplus. I think it's $500,000 at this point. I'm wondering where that is in relation to other years at this time, because it's a far stretch. I think, if memory serves me correct, the surplus at the end of last fiscal year was $7.4 million or something of that nature. So where would we be in comparison to other years at this point?
Through the chair, I would say that it's relatively tight in terms of a projection. I would say, if there was a normal or expected number around mid-year, it would probably be, say, in the $1 to $3 million range. So it's pretty tight. Definitely seeing some pressure from the cost of the development charge exemptions, but then seeing some offsetting savings in other areas. So, something that we'll watch, very carefully as we head into the last part of the year. Again, we'll report back on third quarter. I think from an operating budget perspective, I don't think we ever want to be anywhere more than 2 or 3% off in terms of a surplus. So, so for example, a 3% surplus, just leaving the police out for the moment, a 3% surplus would be in the range of $14 or $15 million. It sounds like a lot of money. It is a lot of money. It's a relatively small variance in the grand scheme of the region's budget. So to say that we're going to be in the range of $500,000 is basically saying we're on target, we're on budget. It's going to be close, and we'll watch it carefully as we move into the fall.
Councilor Verbanovic.
Thank you very much, Chair Harris, and thank you to staff for the update. I think it does point out to a lot of the good work that we've been doing over the first part of the year. I do want to build on Councillor Deutschman's comments with respect to some of the issues, particularly around the King Street shelter. But I also want to touch on Weber and Victoria as a growing area of concern again. And we're in the summer months right now, long before winter, and we're already seeing in recent weeks the numbers at Weber and Victoria going back up. My understanding as of last week we were back up to 29 tents. Some of them with multiple people living in them. And that's certainly a growing concern at this stage. So I do think that we do need to have that broader conversation about all aspects. And one of the things I've talked about with respect to our shelter partners in the past is the need that our funding model needs to go beyond what happens within the four walls of the shelter or only on those properties, but we need to be able to support them and other community partners in terms of addressing the needs in neighborhoods. I think, obviously when a shelter residence arrives in a neighborhood, it does raise concerns. Many residents are open to being part of the solution, but they also want to know that they're being supported in terms of some of the issues that do come along with them. And so I think as we deal with these challenges in the community, it's important that we get it right and that we create a business model that not only meets our needs but also meets the needs of the overall community and the partners that we work with in terms of those shelters. On Neuron, as my second point, I will echo the comments that we've been very pleased in Kitchener with the experience with all of them. Anytime we've had to reach out, they've been great. We've worked with them this summer to actually add our trail network in Kitchener to it, and it's something that we thought would be helpful for the pilot to have that information. I believe they've been set at a maximum of 15 kilometers per hour when they're on the trail network. And I think that'll be helpful information as the final report comes back amongst the various partners that are part of this project. Thank you.
Councillor Huenick.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not quite sure who to direct my question to, but I value the collective wisdom in the room. And so I want to let you know that I appreciate the Neuron scooters and bikes because they're orange, and orange is the best color, but I can't use them. And it's not all about me, but myself and many quadriplegic and paraplegic friends in the community cannot access them. And so I'm wondering if we can partner with Neuron or another company that would have a parallel accessible option, such as a hand bike. And in future, when we do active transportation initiatives, can we ensure that we're looking at the parallel options so they really can be used and enjoyed by everyone?
Matthew, if you want to acknowledge that.
Yeah, thanks for your comments, Councilor Huenick. We'll definitely take it back. That's a good initiative. I think overall, the program, the objective is to give as many options as possible to everyone. So if we can find another option that's economical for that's a great idea.
And I realize that not everyone will use them, even if we offer them. But just the parallel needs of accessibility should always be on the table. So thank you.
Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair Harris. I want to add my voice of thanks to staff. This is a mid-year update, and we're later in this meeting, I believe, going to talk about a strategic plan, the way forward, and that will lead into and be a partner piece to Budget 2024. I guess I'm looking for, and I'd look to Mr. Dyer, can you give us an update on Bill 23? I'm a little foggy whether or not it's actually been proclaimed and the regs have been proclaimed. And I think that's really important because the elimination and phasing in and delay of payment of development charges, I think has the potential to have a huge impact on a go-forward basis. So it may sound comforting to think that we have $500,000 cushion that could disappear very quickly, and the context could change very much in 2024.
Through the chair, I wish it was an easy answer, but I'll try this. So Bill 23 came into effect last November. There are portions of the legislation that have not yet been proclaimed. If I understand it, for example, the section that makes regional governments, I can't remember the language that's used, a region without planning authority or something like that is the language that they use. As I understand it, that section has not yet come into force and is waiting to be proclaimed by the province at some point. That date is not clear as far as I know. That's one piece. The other piece is that there are a couple of sections. So there are a couple of sections that relate to the Development Charges Act that have also not yet been proclaimed. So, for example, there are provisions within Bill 23 that provide for development charge discounts on what the province refers to as attainable housing. That has not yet come into force because a definition of attainable housing has not yet been determined by the province. And on top of that, there are regulations that we're also waiting for. The most notable from a development charges perspective is Bill 23 proposes to make certain land acquisition a development charge ineligible capital cost. So up until now, if, for example, property was acquired for a road widening, for example, the acquisition of that property is eligible to be funded by development charges. The Bill 23 allows for the minister to pass a regulation designating certain services for which land acquisition won't be an eligible cost. And we don't know yet what that looks like. So staff are working with the Act as we understand it right now, putting together the 2024 to 2023 capital program, trying to understand the implications from a development charge perspective. And we will also be coming back with additional information with respect to the timing of our next background study. I hope that's helpful.
I think that's very instructive, and while complicated, you did a great job of expressing some of the uncertainties. So just to caution everybody that this is still a bit of a moving target. Thank you.
Councillor Craig.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm not certain if this is the appropriate time, but I wanted to raise the issue around shelters, specifically, if I may, the bridges in Cambridge with regards to the immigrant population that is now coming into our shelters. Do we have any numbers about what's happening and why are immigrants coming into this region being placed in shelters?
I'm not sure if I'll direct.
I just wanted to catch Mr. Sweeney on the spot.
Let staff, if they can, or they may have to get back to you on that one. But
certainly, I need to look up the number. I do have that in an email somewhere in terms of the percentage accessing shelters. But certainly, the impact that the influx of refugees into this community vis-a-vis our ability to support them and provide housing is under significant strain. We saw that in other communities, most notably in Toronto, certainly in border cities such as Niagara and Windsor. There are thousands, we understand, of folks who are there. So it does put a strain on the shelter system, on the housing system. We are putting forward, hopefully we're going to finalize this week, a request to the federal government for specific support for newcomers and refugees in particular. But I'll have to get you the, I have a number, but I don't want to put it out there because I can't remember if it's right or not, so I'll have to dig it up. But certainly we are seeing folks accessing the shelter system as a last resort, and it's not the most appropriate space, obviously, and we need to look at it more comprehensively to support folks who have specific needs and specific stories that come with them that are different than some other folks who are from this community originally.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I appreciate it. I think we need to have a thorough update about what's happening. I know at Bridges, I believe they have 19 refugees, immigrants in the facility. And I don't feel that's a good mix. That's all. We have to be aware of that. And we can always plead for federal funding, but unfortunately, that doesn't always come through. Thank you.
Good question, Councillor Craig. Perhaps Mr. Sweeney, if there's a way to update council on that question, I think everyone would have an interest in that number. Councillor, we'll go to Councillor Wolf, and then I'll come back to Councillor Deutschman and McCabe. Councillor Wolf.
Yes, I was just going to, through the chair, I was just going to comment on this. Since I've been asked to speak on CBC recently on this, these aren't immigrants, they're refugee claimants. And there's a difference between refugees and refugee claimants. And unfortunately, social services, this is where refugee claimants fall through our social safety net. And as Mr. Sweeney said, that we are in the middle of an application to the federal government. You most probably heard the announcement that they had $212 million that they're giving to the look after refugees and refugee claimants. Toronto was given $100 million, and so there's money that's left over. If we get everything we want, it would cost about $46 million. And that's basically, and this is, I actually received from Peter a whole list, but some of the things are to return the money to the shelters that they've had to put out for the refugees, for us to look at a settlement home, and a number of other things. And I was going to ask today that Council direct the chair to write a letter of support to go along with this, our application for money for the refugees. Anyway, thank you.
Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to circle back on Councillor Craig's question, the only number I have is related to families, and that currently our shelter providers are reporting that 20% of families that are accessing the shelter system are refugee claimants. So that gives you some perspective. To build on Councillor Wolf's comments, again, this is a challenging situation that our community and communities across the country are facing, and it requires a comprehensive and unique approach to ensure that we provide the folks that are choosing to come here, either as their primary location or as a secondary migration pattern, the support that they need to thrive in this community.
Thank you. Councillor Deutschman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to touch on Appendix C, which is the capital program year end. And just, I was just surprised by the amount of projects. I mean, I can understand why they're not going through, but $553 million of budgeted projects and a projected year-end variance of $172 million. I'm presuming that's projects not going ahead. Is that correct?
Through the chair, so it would be a combination in some cases of projects that may not be going ahead. In most cases, projects that are not proceeding as quickly as contemplated when we put the 2023 budget together. So what doesn't get spent in 2023 becomes what we refer to as a carry forward into 2024, because the project is approved. If it's not done this year, we carry the unspent funds forward into the following year.
So looking at this report, it says the year-end variance will be $172 million. If we traditionally spend $500 million every year, so that'll be like $600 or $700 million of projects in 2024 that we're expected then to, like, there's got to be a carryover. If we're not doing it one year, we're pushing it into the next year. Is that sustainable?
Yep.
It is sustainable?
So a good question. It is sustainable, and it's sustainable because as we put together the next iteration of the 10-year capital program, a couple of things happen. First of all, we take into account the fact that we haven't completed all of the projects that were contemplated in the current year. So a certain amount of investment then moves into the following year. That almost always results in, I'm trying to think of the right word, a reprofiling of the capital expenditure on other projects as well. Because there's a few different things we're trying to balance here. We're trying to make sure that from an internal staff capacity that we have the ability to actually deliver on these projects. From a financial sustainability perspective, that we have the ability to fund and finance the projects that are going ahead. So it's not simply a matter of, in this case, carrying forward $172 million and simply adding it to what's already there in 2024. We take a full look at the entire 10-year capital program, reprofile, recalibrate based on our current knowledge of when these projects need to go ahead. Okay. And that's what helps to make it sustainable in the longer term.
Okay, I understand. So some projects could get delayed then when you recalibrate your capital plan.
Oh, certainly. Right. We'll look at in some cases there are often projects that are what we'd call a predecessor project. And if that project has been delayed, then there are other projects that would then need to be delayed as well. And we would look at every project as we put the capital program together. That's the process we're in the middle of right now.
All right. Yeah, and just not to belabor it, but I look forward to more detail on this on a go-forward basis.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Councilor McCabe.
Okay, yeah, I'm on. Thanks very much. Through you, Chair. I also just wanted to just really quickly note, because there's a lot of good stuff in this report. The updated, the 114 of the 125 water sites that were updated. That I think is really the data management that's updated, the operations and the protection from cybersecurity. Really, really important. Obviously, water is critically important to us. And just a quick shout out to the KW Wigwam, who is included, I think, in the updated numbers, who have newly opened their transitional housing in Waterloo. We're really pleased to have them there, and thanks to Scott Higgins, who the developer from HIP Developments, who worked with the region and with KW Wigwam, Urban Native Wigwam, to use that space for the time being. So really great work on that. I have a question. So this is, I still think of myself as new. So I'm just curious about when we're looking at the surplus, and I know it's like it could be gone in very quickly, but I'm just curious about, so with the police, they have the first quarter, I think it was surplus of $3 million. So I know that's a separate budget, but it's also regional dollars. So why is that not noted in with respect to this kind of an mid-year update?
Yeah, so through the chair, I would say that at the time of putting the report together over the course of last month, I don't believe we had a projection to year end for the police. So once we see some additional information come through to the board, we'll make sure that that's included and incorporated into our into our projection model. So when we do our Q3 update, we'll include whatever the most recent information is from the police. I think we've traditionally shown, so we've traditionally shown the surplus for the police as a separate item. There's a separate policy that determines how that surplus is used. And so we try to focus on the specific items that council is responsible for.
Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair Harris. If I can just pick up on the point that Councillor Deutschmann was making. So that recalibration, Craig, that you're talking about in the capital program, we would see those changes as part of the budget process?
Yes, absolutely.
I think that's really important as we go forward, that I know staff do a great job, but I think it's really important that council continue to be aware when I really thought your point about a precursor capital project being delayed, that causes a chain reaction, but I think it's really important for council to understand that. And I just wanted to reflect on the encouragement by this committee to write a letter to go along with the application that Mr. Sweeney and his staff will be submitting to the federal government. Really happy to do that. I have already reached out informally to the local MPs when I heard about the $212 million and said, how do we get some of that? So we're on it and happy to continue pushing that rope up a hill.
Thank you, Chair Redmond. Councillor Verbanovich.
Yeah, thanks. Just very quickly, as a follow-up to Mr. Sweeney's information earlier, when you referenced 20% of families, I guess what I'm interested in is how many families are we dealing with in the shelter system? Because, 20% of 2 families is very different than 20% of 100 families.
Thank you for that question. If I can ask for some time to get you specific numbers, I will reach out to Tara Bedard and get that information to you so that we know what we're talking about. The majority of shelter participants in the system, however, are individuals, so it's a relatively small number. But I appreciate the question, and I will get you the information before the end of the day.
Sure, that's great. And we can also get any info about the number of individuals as well, like outside of families.
Will do. Thank you.
Thanks.
We will now vote on the recommendation in the report. I'd like to read that motion that the regional municipality of Waterloo approve the continuation of electronic, I'm on that is the wrong one. That the regional municipality of Waterloo take the following action with respect to the 2023 mid-year update as set out in the report as follows, dated August 15th, 2023. A, receive the 2023 mid-year update that shows implementation and financial progress towards delivery on the region's annual business plan in support of achieving the vision set out by Council in the Strategic Plan 2019 to 2023, and B, amend the 2023 tax-supported capital budget as set out in Appendix D. Moved by Councillor James, seconded by Councillor McCabe. Please use your yes or no buttons in eScribe. As all votes are recorded. I'll just remind Council. Yes. And that is carried. I would now like to call on CAO Bruce Lackner to introduce the report and provide a presentation with regards to the corporate strategic plan. Mr. Lackner.
Thank you, Chair. I really appreciate it. That last conversation was a really good warm-up for the new strategic plan to see Council so engaged in the discussion of our current strategic plan and what's important, and also acknowledging how quickly things are changing in this growing community. I'm so excited to share this final strategic plan report with you today. I want to begin by saying that at the heart of this is our 650,000 residents, and per the last conversation, growing every single day as we quickly grow to 1 million people in this 10th largest community in Canada, which again is growing rapidly than most other communities in this country. We know through your guidance that foundational services are also part of an integral part of the strategic plan. We've taken both an existing current state approach as well as a long-term approach to developing this plan, because as you all just articulated, in a range of different service areas, what we do now will impact the future, both for current residents and all the hundreds of thousands of people who are going to move here in the next 20 years. When we think about the 1 million people who will call Waterloo Region home, we look at this from a number of perspectives, not only our residents, but all the services that we provide. So we will need more personal support workers to be at the bedside. We will need more water inspectors. We will need more police, more nurses. And based again on the last conversation, it sounds like bylaw officers and outreach workers and so on. So a growing need in this community. We see this in healthcare. We see this in education. We see this at the cities and townships. We have a lot of things to consider then as staff and a council as we head through the strategic plan, because this will be the basis for our budget for 2024, 25, 26, and 27. How are we going to meet those new demands? Where are we going to choose to invest our dollars? I heard a lot of appetite for investments in certain areas, and we all know that means what aren't we going to invest in to make sure that our tax rates stay at a reasonable level? I know we've faced these challenges before, and through meaningful partnerships, we will definitely find creative solutions to these challenges. This is the Waterloo Region way, and this has been our story for decades and will continue to be our story in the years ahead. If we can go to the next slide, you'll recall these visionary statements because you created them. These aren't our words. This is the words that Council said to us over many, many sessions over the summer. Throughout this process of creating the plan, the good news is Council's vision, the words that you're using, are aligning exactly with the words that we heard from the 650,000 residents of this community in terms of what's most important. All this input, as well as the direction from Council, has culminated in what's before you today for your consideration of approval. You and the residents have said that you envision this place, this region, being the #1 place to live in Canada. You envision that this region meet its climate targets and announce climate zero options. The vision you articulated talked about a Waterloo region that implements a 20-year transit plan where the use of cars has diminished, but alternatives are in place because we realize that, that we need other modes of transportation. So again, all of these items you see on the slide were important to both you and community. We know they're aspirational, and that's what they're intended to be. So how do we get from where we are today to where we want to be? That's where implementation of this plan is so important. It can't just be a poster on the wall. It has to be about what we're all about each and every day. As you just heard, we've made significant progress on our last strategic plan, again, because it's not just something that's a slogan. This turns into meaningful action. It turns into master plans. It turns into project plans. It turns into real tangible action. Think of what you've done over the last number of years in terms of the roadmap to get things done. You invested in and you launched ION. You grew partnerships with a range of public sector organizations and so many in the business community. If you think of the pandemic, and the prior council's decision to focus on small businesses, to focus on mid-sized businesses, to focus on large businesses, and make sure we get through the pandemic with a vibrant economy that was so important as we move forward so that we can afford to do the things that are critical to this community, like affordable housing and the decision of council. And we're well on our path to achieve 10 times the amount of affordable social housing as the track we were on previously. We improved core services that touch the lives of every resident, thanks to your leadership and the difficult decisions that you've made in terms of investments. So again, this strategic plan builds on the report that you just received in terms of our mid-year report and the current strategic plan. Well, as you've all acknowledged through your previous comments and through the comments over the summer months, we know that there's change ahead. We know that things are changing before our eyes, and it's going to be a very different region between now and 2027. We, through your leadership again, will need to adapt our services to allow for more access to those services to meet the diverse needs of our growing community, again, as we head towards 1 million people who call Waterloo Region home. You've heard it before, and we've said we can't do this by ourselves. This is a all-of-community effort, and again, we need to be very intentional with who we partner, where we invest in the days and weeks ahead. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Connie and team to walk you through more details and get very practical of what this means going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. I want to echo your comments about this being an exciting moment in time as we reflect on the kind of community that we want to create. The process to develop the strategic plan intentionally combined traditional planning methods, including data analysis, with newer approaches like strategic foresight to address the complexity of the challenges our community faces into the future. Most importantly, it was grounded in considerable engagement to elevate the voices of community, including those traditionally not heard from in strategic planning approaches. The result, as we'll share with you today, is a comprehensive plan that reflects the priorities shared by residents, aligned with the vision that Council has set. Prior to engaging with staff and community, it was important to confirm and better understand our community's current state. There were two key data analytics projects that helped to inform the process. The first, our community profile. It shares demographic data on key issues and trends in Waterloo Region. It's a digital data hub that continues to be a resource on the region's website for residents and community, and this is generating considerable excitement. I'm excited to see how it grows as a considerable resource for the community, and we continue to hear about the need for more shared and open data as many organizations face the same challenges that we do in their planning into the future. The second piece was the strategy map. Regional strategies and master plans, both those that the region is leading, but also ones that are region affiliated, were mapped to share an inventory of actions and targets underway so that we're not starting from scratch. As Bruce said, there's a lot of great work that's already underway, and we built on that in building the strategic plan. We can now also see the plans and strategies that will be impacted as we look to implement the new strategic plan. You hear us talk a lot about engagement today, and I'm incredibly proud that this strategic plan is the most consultative and collaborative the region has ever developed. The plan reflects the inputs of thousands of people who share their ideas and inputs in a variety of different ways. I'd especially like to thank and acknowledge the reconciliation and equity, diversity, and inclusion team at the region who provided leadership and support every step of the way. Their leadership was critical to support us in engagement approaches that built relationships, embedded equity, built trust, and ensured that there were multiple ways for all communities across Waterloo Region to participate. This included formal and informal opportunities, including specific efforts to reach those often not included, such as residents living in the countrysides, youth, seniors, Indigenous peoples, and equity-seeking groups. To support this, we hired community connectors to help reach more people and support our engagement efforts. Here to share his experience as a community connector is Marzouk, and I am thrilled to share the podium with him today. Marzouk?
Good morning, Council, regional staff, and attendees. My name is Marzouk Ali, a soon-to-be grade 11 student, a community connector for the region, and most importantly, a member of our community. So I chose to become a community connector because, as someone who has always wanted to help others and make a positive impact, I found that this was a great opportunity to talk to the community, hear different perspectives, and overall develop a strong understanding of others' views in a unique way that could benefit everyone in the long term through the region's strategic plan. This was achieved through attending various events, drop-ins, and community conversations hosted throughout the region's cities and townships. During these engagements, myself and my fellow connectors who took on this role asked a variety of questions that encouraged discussion and helped to understand others' perspectives regarding different areas of life in the region. Most notably, we were able to reach communities, especially rural ones, who are underrepresented and whose voices we often do not hear. For example, one of the events I attended was a barbecue in the township of Wellesley. As someone who has never lived or experienced life in a rural area, what initially seemed like a rather quiet event with few attendees likely to come ended up having a significantly large turnout with more people than I had ever expected. I found that the input these rural community members gave, specifically in the areas of environmentalism and sustainable living, were very unique compared to their urban counterparts. Another event I was amazed by was the KW Multicultural Festival. As the name suggests, people from a variety of ethnicities came, with many choosing to stop by our booths to share their thoughts. During this event, I was able to hear the perspectives of a diverse group of people who all had their own stories to share. It was very interesting to hear their thoughts on what could be improved, specifically in terms of housing and the costs of goods and services based on their own experiences. These two areas of life specifically, housing and costs, were some of the most reoccurring topics that were brought up by the community, no matter the event we attended or individual we spoke to. All in all, it was very apparent that the community wanted to share their perspectives and convey their thoughts and concerns in a meaningful way for the purposes of making change. Through the strategic plan, I hope for these changes to happen so that we can all see a continuously improving region in the coming years, and one in which we are all able to live our best lives. Although all these engagements would be considered informal, all the feedback we gathered was equally important and incorporated into the formal process, which was facilitated by Creative Futures, who will tell you more.
Thank you so much, Marzouk. It's so great to see you again, and so great to see all of you again. So this next strategic plan is for the next 4 years, but it is about so much more than that. It is really about how we unlock the hopes, aspirations, and opportunities that you yourselves, as well as residents, express to us, and to really move towards the future that we want. And so to better articulate and understand what that future is, we used a strategic foresight process to help us really understand how the changes we're seeing today might shape different possible futures, and within those different possible futures, where we actually wanted to be. And not only where we want to be with blue sky ambitions, but also what are some of the key steps that we'll need to propel us towards that. So that is really what our process together has been, starting off with deep evidence base of the changes we're seeing around us, using that to understand what are the key changes that we need to pay attention to, understanding what those key changes might mean in 25 years in different ways and how they might shape and mature differently, and then using that to identify what are the key near-term steps that are needed to get us to where we want to be in the future. So we started off our work together. Go to the next slide. Thank you. Looking at the research that had been collected through the resident survey, through the community safety and well-being plan and strategy, as well as many other engagement activities that had happened, as well as ongoing engagement, supplemented and augmented by additional research to identify about 30 different changes with the potential to impact significantly and shape the future of the Waterloo region in 2050. And we brought those to you for our very first session together. And together you identified 12 key changes that will really shape and are really important to pay attention to as we plan for the future. And these are those futures. These are those trends here on the slide, and there's more in the report about that. And then to better understand what these changes might mean in the future, we created 4 different possible futures to provoke a conversation about what if these different changes interacted in different ways? What might we want to anticipate? And the purpose of this process wasn't to predict what the future might be, but to actually help us better understand what we wanted the future to be, of which we heard loud and clear from yourselves, from community, from staff, exactly what we want that future to be. In fact, we heard thousands of ideas of what we wanted that to be and how we might get there, which we synthesized into 10 key themes that, again, we discussed, ranging from everything related to housing, to how we get around, to how we want to support the environment, to how we want to ensure equity, diversity, and inclusion and reconciliation, as well as building a future that is prosperous for everybody. And so based on these 10 themes, the last time we got together back in June, we discussed potential emerging focus areas, of which we had a fantastic conversation to better understand what exactly might this mean if we take these key themes that we heard from thousands of residents and yourselves, and also anticipate the key trends that are emerging that will shape the future. And that brings us to today. And I'm about to pass things over to Jenny, and we're really excited to talk about some key focus areas that we do feel will propel us towards a future where Waterloo Region could be #1 place to live.
Thanks so much, Jessica, and good morning, Council. So we all know that when you create strategy, you need to be crystal clear on what you're trying to achieve and how you'll get there. But real success only comes from having all the people standing alongside you ready to bring that plan to life. So before I jump into the strategy, I'd like to start with our organisation's new draft mission, vision, values. These might look like simple statements, but they're vital to good strategy execution, and it's important to get these pieces right. So whether you're a bus operator, a fleet mechanic, a technician in water services, or analyst in IT, everyone has to be united on this same journey. So what you see on screen is a statement of this. Throughout the process, we've heard that council, community, and staff are very aligned in terms of what's important. We heard loud and clear that together our vision for Waterloo Region is a compassionate community that cares for all people, stewards the land for future generations, and where everyone has the opportunity to live a good life. This reflects our commitment to truth and reconciliation, and it speaks to a community that embraces possibilities and values everyone that comes to the table. As an organisation, our mission is to support this vision by collaborating with community to bring life essentials to everyone living, working, and visiting here today and tomorrow. And when we say essentials, we mean health services, transit, children's and senior services, paramedics, waste management, and so much more. And finally, the core values and behaviours speak to who we are. We're an organisation of committed public servants, caring for all people and the land that we share. These statements are all still a work in progress, but we really welcome your guidance today. It was important to share these with you as they lay the foundation for the strategy. We'll be back in September with the final versions. So keeping all that in mind, here is the new draft strategic plan with 4 strategic priorities that will support Waterloo Region to thrive in the coming years as it grows. As Bruce said earlier, this is a strategy all about growing with care and intentionality. It's an integrated approach where each priority connects to the others. You can't pick and choose which one you move forward in isolation of all of the others or at the expense of any of the others. That doesn't result in real success. So what are the big takeaways for the next 4 years? There's far more detail in your package and that speaks to potential actions and performance measures, and we'll take the balance of this year through plan and budget to really finalise those. So just remember, as I'm speaking, these are the summit of thousands of conversations in your workshops. We hope that we heard you accurately. So firstly, the strategy includes a priority that whoever you are, you have a home here in Waterloo Region that meets your needs. This is a shared priority with literally hundreds of partners all playing their part to solve the housing crisis and ensuring that homes are part of inclusive and sustainable communities. It's not just about the bricks and mortar. This strategy is about our line in the sand on climate change. We see the impacts of global warming and adverse weather effects every day, and we must do more to adapt. This strategy is about providing equitable services and opportunities to everyone, wherever you live in Waterloo Region. Waterloo Region's successfully grown over the years as a direct result of the diversity of its communities and the unique gifts that everyone brings. An increasingly diverse community requires its government to work differently with them. Means collaborating to provide safe, effective and culturally appropriate services to everyone, breaking down barriers for those who identify as seniors, youth, having a disability, living with a low income, newcomers, refugees, racialized communities, Indigenous communities, 2S LGBTQ+, and those living with mental health and addictions challenges. And the final piece of the puzzle is ensuring that the organisation, its people, and our service models are resilient, affordable, and future-ready. As we know, Ontario municipalities are currently experiencing significant challenges, and we're no different. Shifting mandates and changing community needs and compounding fiscal restraints mean that we're really facing quite a complex future. So facing this complex future will require new thinking, skills, collaboration, data, and new technologies such as AI and automation. Our strategy must invest in employees and our organisational culture that values diverse leadership and encourages employees to work differently with each other, community, and its partners. So we'll move on to this next bit, but I'm really going to just kind of skirt through, but dig a little deeper because it's all in your package. So the first one, to support the goal of homes for all, we'll invest in affordable homes and economic opportunities that are part of inclusive and environmentally sustainable communities. To advance this outcome, we'll move quickly to create affordable, accessible and equitable housing that reflects the present and future needs of residents. We'll take action to eliminate chronic homelessness and reliance on traditional shelter models, advancing the foundational work that's already underway. We'll invest in upstream solutions that reduce housing precarity, extending our focus beyond the traditional domain of housing solutions to focus on preventative interventions and wraparound supports. This approach also supports the next generation of homeowners to get the best start they need. And finally, we'll unlock land that supports community growth. The next priority is supporting climate-aligned growth. As we grow, we'll support a healthy environment where communities can thrive. Through intentional collaboration and creativity, we'll support sustainable community growth. Over the next 4 years, we'll use a climate adaptation lens to reimagine infrastructure, land, and the services needed for growth. We'll foster car alternative options, and we'll steward our natural environment and shared resources as we grow. Next, we have our equitable services and opportunities priority. Through collaboration and innovative design, we'll provide equitable, accessible services across Waterloo Region that support the social determinants of health and complete communities as we grow. Over the next 4 years, we'll ensure services are inclusive, accessible, culturally safe, and appropriate. And we'll design equitable regional services that meet local needs. And we'll explore new models of service delivery through community collaboration and partnerships, because you've heard this time and time again, we certainly can't do this alone. And the final, fourth priority is to build a resilient and future-ready organisation, which is a great place to work, where everyone is valued, feels they belong, and where they have the supports and tools they need to do a really great job. We'll be prepared for the future by providing safe spaces for bold ideas and experimentation that will really transform services. Over the next 4 years, we'll foster an empowered, people-centred culture, and we'll reconcile past injustices to advance our future together, centering the voices of those facing most barriers to equity in our work. And we'll explore new service models and partnerships to achieve fiscal resilience and better service overall. Overall, this plan is ambitious and it will take time to implement, but we're not starting from scratch, and we're continuing and building on the work of so many before us and those alongside us. So I'll hand it back over to Connie MacDonald, who'll talk a little bit about the next steps.
Thank you, Jenny. We're really looking forward to the discussion today. In terms of next steps on the plan, once we have a council-approved strategic plan, there's a ton of work that follows, some very exciting work. The immediate next step will be to implement a communication strategy to share the new plan. Staff will continue to work to refine the vision, mission, and values components to support the organizational culture that's necessary to achieve the new strategic goals set by council. The strategic plan will be incorporated into the 2024 business plan and budget process, and through this process, initiatives will be identified and aligned to the new strategic priorities. We will evaluate and report on the progress of the strategic plan, developing a performance measurement framework to support data-informed decision-making, and as always, regular updates and reports will be brought forward to council. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the incredible and exceptional work that the team, in concert with many others in the community and staff, have put into this plan. We're so excited to share this final draft with you and are looking forward to questions and discussion. With that, I'll turn it back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have questions from Councilor Hewinik.
Through the chair, when I look at the the projected strategic plan in comparison to the previous one, or the one that we're working with currently, I noticed that there are a lot more directives in the previous strategic plan in terms of like each of the key priorities has 1.2, 1.3, and so on and so forth. And I think that would be very helpful to take into budget season. Oh, dear Lord, help us. And so I'm just wondering, like, is that still, are the 1.2, 1.3, like all the action steps still coming, or have those been represented in the bullet points, or can you flesh that out for me?
Happy to help, and thank you for the question. It would be helpful to think about the bullet points as the 1 and the 2 and the 3, and the point 1, point 2, point 3 still to come through the process and development of the specific actions as part of the plan and budget process, not just for 2024, but looking forward through the life cycle of the plan. You don't have to do everything in the first year of your strategic plan, but we'll work with you to map out those actions over the next 4 years and specifically what that looks like.
I just want to make sure that it is an actionable plan that we can take into budget season, which starts in a month, I think. So, and secondly, I just want to provide a brief comment around, while I was happy to engage in all 4 of the council strategic planning workshops and contribute in conversations individually, I think this report gave the impression that we had more input than we may have been able to produce, given the time-sensitive nature of the activities and the brainstorming that we engaged in. So, with that, I'll turn it over. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Huinek. Councilor Wolf.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank your staff for this incredible work. You did such a great job engaging the public and council, and taking all these bits and pieces and putting them into this report. Must have been a tremendous amount of work, and I really appreciate the vision and the strategic plan that you've provided us. Thank you.
Councilor Rabinovich.
Thanks very much, Chair Harris. And I too want to pass on my thanks to all of the staff and the community members who have taken time to be part of this process. Getting the input of hundreds and hundreds of people is no easy task, but an important one as we embark on a new strategic plan that really allows us to focus on the things that are priorities for us as a region, and on the roles that the regional government has in particular. Couple questions in terms of this, because I think it is a very thorough document. But I'm just wondering under Homes for All and the 4th point, which is actually number 1, but it references we'll make land available across the region appropriate for affordable housing, shovel-ready employment lands, and so on. And I realize that we started this process before Bill 23 happened, and obviously our role going forward is going to change. Is that some wording that needs to be adjusted to reflect the changes that are going to be happening in terms of the role the region plays versus the area municipalities around this, to just sort of better reflect that?
Mr. Lochner.
Yeah, I can try and respond. It wasn't intended to create confusion in the sense that it's not referring to, say, land use planning or the role that the area municipalities across the province will definitely be taking on. If we think of lands that the region may own that we would provide available to affordable housing, to shelters like we have, that was what that first wording was intended to refer to. In terms of the role that we play, in partnership with WREDC and the province and the shovel-ready land work. I'm not sure that's impacted by Bill 23 in the sense of that work around water, around infrastructure and so on. So I'm not, I mean, we should have that discussion, but I don't see Bill 23 necessarily getting that specific on shovel-ready land preparation. The roles may shift. Well, the roles definitely would shift in terms of the land itself, but in terms of the infrastructure preparation and all the heavy lifting that the region does, that's Bill 23 doesn't comment on that.
So we may want to make some reference to regionally owned lands in that section or something. I think it might just be helpful from a clarity point of view. And then the only other one that I have a comment on is under climate aligned growth, fostering car alternative options. If you just look at it on the previous slide where that's the only thing that's listed, it kind of seems to take away the notion that, you know, we still have a role to play in terms of complete streets, that sort of finds the balance between cars, cycling, pedestrians, and so on. And so I'm wondering if, you know, for that title piece of that, the expanded wording there, I think really gets at what we're trying to do, which is, you know, bring about a modal shift, but it's really going to require, you know, continued focus in all areas and doing things differently. And so I'm wondering if it could be a little bit of tweaking to the wording on that title, and maybe that's something staff can take away between now and when it comes back to council.
Thank you, Councilor Rabinovich. Councilor James.
Thank you, through you, Chair Harris. Thank you for putting this together and all the work that went in and the community engagement. I have a couple of questions. The first, I just want clarification with regard to the community profile. And you had mentioned kind of an open data source that's available for residents. Can you confirm if that information is disaggregated in the data? And I'm thinking of kind of, be it aging, ethnicity, languages. Is that available and disaggregated on that website?
There you go. So there is a variety of different data there, and there are sources that do speak to some of the things that you flagged there. Part of the strategy is actually, and if you look at our performance indicators, a need for us to get better disaggregated data around transit use and use of all of our services so that we can really start to understand that better. So I hope that answers your question.
Sort of, yes, thank you. The other thing too is with this information, I know there was a recent census that was done. Has that been encompassed as well in there? Okay, all right. And then the other kind of question is around just some of the fiscal, responsibility. Where is that kind of outlined within this, just in terms of, I think that came up in our discussions as well. Just want to speak to that a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. That's really reflected in the resilient and future ready pillar. We have ambitious goals, but we can't do everything. And so there are some core initiatives under that pillar to really critically look at the choices that we're making, the services that we're delivering, how we deliver those services, so that we're taking into account affordability into the future.
Chair Harris, just one more quick follow-up question. Additional question, and that is around some of the work that was done with our aging population. Can you speak to the community engagement around our aging population?
Sure. So, as I mentioned in my remarks, engagement with seniors was incredibly important, and a number of the events that our community connectors were able to get out to and talk to seniors. There's a lot of great work that's happening in the community around older adult and age-friendly communities, and it's certainly a component as we look at equitable services for all, ensuring that we're supporting an aging population in those services.
Councilor Salonen.
Thank you very much, through you, Chair. I was just wondering, looking at the vision and mission, specifically on the mission statement, I love the broadness of scope and the essence that we're going for. I do fear on literally the term life's essentials being super broad. Like when I read that, I mean, part of me was going, are we talking about nutrient essentials? Are we talking about love and belonging? Are we talking about infrastructure so you can walk down the road? I just think it might be a little bit broad to make it actually attainable as a mission. Again, I love the direction and the essence of what you're trying to capture. Is there a way to maybe tighten that up just to make it a bit more of an attainable focus, is what I was wondering.
I'm happy to provide a bit of commentary on sort of where that comes from. You know, we were really intentional in development of this strategic plan in getting out on the front line. And standing, you know, on bus platforms with operators and getting out into our long-term care home, you know, with PSWs, you know, where they're at the bedside, spending time with nurses in public health. The beauty of the region of Waterloo and the challenge of a strategy at the region of Waterloo is really the depth and breadth of the services that we provide. And every single employee that we spoke to gets up and out of bed every single day for one driving force. And that's really around the quality of life that they're able to support people living here and the essential services that they feel they provide. And so, you know, bringing life's essentials, which are many of the things that the region of Waterloo does, mind you, many other things we do in partnership with many others, really spoke to, you know, how people felt about, you know, the work that we do in the region's role. That said, we do have some work to refine it, so appreciate the comments, and you may see wording changes as we do more engagement with staff.
Councilor Erb.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Connie and the team for all the work you did in this, particularly the effort for public engagement. I really like growing with care. I think that that captures so much of the four elements that it wraps into all of them, and I really like that, and I think that's something that we can all identify with. My question is related to economic development and growth. And we can't do any of this without our economy in the region growing. In our previous strategic plan, one of the pillars, if that's what we want to call them, was a thriving economy. This time we're talking about housing, climate, organizational equity. And so it's not defined as specific as it has been in the past. My conversation with you yesterday, where you're trying to weave this through the whole plan, was very helpful. And I think it might be, or to me, would be helpful if you could share that with council, that sort of that strategy, because again, unless we're growing economically, we're not going to do any of this. I don't have any specific plans or suggestions or wording of how that could be reincorporated back into what's here, but I think it would be helpful to share that vision of how you've tried to weave that through the entire strategic plan.
And thank you, Councillor, for the question. So one thing you'll notice that's really different about this strategic plan is our last strategic plan, which we made a lot of significant progress on, you could almost map every pillar to a particular commissioner. And so, you know, there's a transportation pillar, and there's an economic development, thriving economy pillar, and healthy, safe, and inclusive, which was fantastic and allowed us to move things forward. This plan is very much intentionally designed to be integrated. And so you won't find a pillar that is the responsibility of one department or one person, but rather that all of the pieces and all of our teams have to work together to realize this strategic plan. Thinking about economic opportunity, I really see that woven throughout all of the pillars. As you said, we can't do anything without a thriving economy and a supported community here with lots of opportunity. So I see that in the work under Homes for All, as we talk about land readiness and supporting development. I see that in equitable services and opportunities. Equitable opportunities is about employment opportunities for all. People need to have employment opportunities to be able to live a good life here. And thinking about, our income support workers or those who connect people with employment opportunities who might be on Ontario Works. Really see that in those pillars, as well as in, thinking about climate-aligned growth and what kind of economic opportunities will come from that. So you're right, it's not a specific pillar as it was in our last strategy, but is intentionally woven throughout the plan.
Thank you. Yeah, and I appreciate that shift and value how you're trying to weave that through, and I can see where it's going to probably be an effective tool across the whole organization in bringing everybody together, working on the same thing. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, through you, Chair, and thanks to Connie and the team for putting together an excellent document. It's always a fun time when you get to dig into those kind of conversations, and I really enjoyed the Margaret Atwood-esque future scenarios that we talked about in, I think, our first engagement session. A little bit scary, but really helped to kind of focus the mind. And congratulations and thanks, Marsook, for your involvement too. An excellent presentation this morning. Very well done. I really like the compassionate community piece of that. I think that really speaks volumes and is a really great message to share to ourselves as council, to staff, to the community. So really like that word. I really don't want to do wordsmithing, but in the mission, I just think that word every single person, in my mind it went, oh, everyone who isn't with the partner. So I don't know if single is actually needed in there. I'll leave that with you. But yeah, that was my immediate response, or my immediate thought was like, was this just for people who aren't partnered up? Something that I do want to see a change, though, is that the population numbers are in this report. I know it said it's using the 2021 population numbers, but we've had in March 2023 the 2022 population numbers, and particularly for Waterloo, our population is 30,000. There's a 30,000 person difference. So that's significant. So in the strategic plan, you have us at 121,436, but then in the 2022 data, it's actually just over 51,000. And I think might be some changes in some of the numbers for some of the other communities. So I think that's really important to make that change. I really appreciate all the stuff that's in there about transportation and reprofiling in that. But I just thought for consistency, like there's on page 23, it's talking, or sorry, not page 23, car-free mobility on page 43. It talks about, pardon me, expanding the public transit network and including the commitment to phase 2 of the LRT. And this may mean reprofiling infrastructure spending towards transit over roads. And then it also, on page 28, it's explore the viability of expanding free public transit for specific populations while reducing investment in the growth network. There is consistency there, but what I was wondering about is could we use stronger language, like will and shall instead of possibly? Because I think it's, as we were just talking about in our mid-year update, these capital, if we're going to meet these climate change targets and make this shift, the modal shift, I think those statements should be wills and should be emphatic. So instead of the possible and may. So I'll leave that with you for consideration. That would certainly be my preference in there. I don't know how much time I have left because I had a couple other things. Oh, okay, I got another minute. I'll do a couple more. I wasn't sure, and I'm wondering if you could explain what it means for page 16, innovate with the private sector, nonprofit sector, area municipalities Like, we already do a lot of that, so is that more like continue to, or are you thinking of something kind of different? Because, I mean, we know the region and the area municipalities, like, we hire the private sector all the time to, on roadworks or what have you, right? And we work with the public sector on, housing and lots of, lots of community engagement and things like that. So I was just wondering what that actually meant. If you could explain that. And I had one other question. My other question was on page 47. I found it interesting that staff said it was clear that many saw opportunities to be innovative in their approaches. That's great, but felt red tape and silos prevented this. And I was just curious if this is intermunicipal red tape, like because we're in a two-tier municipal structure, or if that's was referring to within the region itself. So, again,
I'll do my best.
To get through it all there. I can repeat some of those. I was trying to get in my 5 minutes.
How about I'll do my best and we can follow up as needed. So thinking about innovation and partnerships, I think it really speaks to the culture that we want to build. And, speaking to staff around red tape and risk, we want people to feel safe and comfortable doing things differently. And while we have been able to innovate a lot, I think we want to be able to innovate more and to be able to, take calculated and supported risks in trying different things. And I think that that's sort of what that speaks to. It also speaks to sustainability and how we look critically at the services that we provide and the way that we provide them. And if there are ways that we could be or should be doing things differently, learning from others and looking at how we provide those services. So not to say that we're not currently innovating or working in partnership, but I think it's really about the culture that we're trying to build and the support that we want to give our staff in being able to look outside of the box.
Thank you, Councillor McCabe.
Thank you.
Councillor Liggett.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Connie. This is extremely comprehensive and it makes for very good reading. One thing that I find missing, and I brought it up during our conversations with council during our workshops, when we look under key trends, I don't see anything to do with this feeling of being unsafe by the community. And we hear a lot of that. And when I look at one of the key trends as being democracy under pressure, and we talk about political polarization, sometimes that comes from that feeling of being unsafe, and it creates a fear in the community. I read a book by Micah White a few years ago, and it portrayed the future as we're starting to see it now, where anarchy starts to creep in. And I have a very strong fear that we are remiss by not at least mentioning under key trends the feeling of community being unsafe on the streets or in the region. It should be part of our strategic plan. I think that that word safe can be very selective, and I see it used throughout this document, but it has nothing to do with how people feel in this community. And we talk about partnerships and service, and I don't see that in that safety message. If we're only going to be using the word safe when it comes to racialized or people who are with the LGBTQ community, then we are missing out on that feeling for the general population. So I just want to bring it to everybody's attention and that this document to me, by not even touching on it, misses an opportunity, because in those next few years, that is going to be a trend that we should have looked at today. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Huenick.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Connie. The perspective on integration of the priorities is very, very helpful, both for a planning perspective and the fact that, we don't need to exist in silos. We can all work together and solve a lot of problems in the community. And my comments around wordsmithing, I promise we didn't talk about them in advance, but was the same as Mayor McCabe's around removing the word single, because the same emphasis would be if it's just every person, the same as every single person. So, thanks.
Thank you, and I love wordsmithing. I've made a profession out of it, so happy to take that away and talk more about all people as opposed to every single person. So thank you for that.
Councilor McCabe.
Thanks. And just one other thing that I meant to mention was on page 37 under the climate aligned decisions and plans, there's references to the use of vehicles in that, but which is important, and I really do appreciate that you heard from lots of people around the need to improve transit and active transportation. But I was just also thinking about, it's not just transit, it's not just vehicles that emit the carbon, it's also built the heating and cooling part. And so some reference to, renewable energy sources for the heating and cooling of public and private buildings, because we know those exist. They're not that much more expensive than, traditional, say, furnaces and things like that. But if we could just make a reference to that somewhere as well, because it's not just vehicles. Although one other thing to note was under the affordability, or under the trends, I should say, the income disparity that was noted here really is that's a huge worry that's there. And one that I think we'll really have to think about. On the upside, affordability, like using transit and active transportation, like in building a community where those are possible, and those 15-minute communities really goes a long way to addressing that affordability piece, because you wouldn't have to pay thousands of dollars for a vehicle. So I think that's really great. But still, that income disparity piece is something that I think we'll really, really need to think about, certainly with this plan, but in the coming years, and how to address that and what that means for our community. But again, thank you very much. This is really a lot of work, a lot of distilling of conversations and comments, and really well done. Thank you.
On that note, we will now vote on the recommendation in the report. I'll read the motion that the Regional Municipality of Waterloo approve the 2023-2027 strategic plan as outlined in the report dated August 15th, 2023. I would like or ask for a mover of the report, Councilor Wolf, seconded by Councilor Huenick. Please use your yes or no button in eScribe. And that is passed. Thank you. I will move to item 7.2, strategic focus, responsive and engaging public service. I will call on Will Short, Regional Clerk, to introduce the report. Will.
Thank you, Chair Harris. The purpose of this report is to review the in-person participation following a year trial basis as directed by Regional Council in August of 2022. At that time, Regional Council approved in-person participation for council members as the default method of participation, but permitted electronic participation for both members of the public and council, with the stipulation that council would review the electronic participation of council members following a one-year trial basis. The last technological upgrade to council chambers was in 2018, and it did not anticipate the virtual meeting requirement. Clerk staff were able to make modifications in 2020 to allow for hybrid meetings, but with uncertainty around the future of hybrid meetings, resources were not allocated to upgrade the technology. If it is determined that electronic participation for council should continue, then the committee should consider electronic upgrades to improve the quality and reliability of the electronic system in council chambers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Clerk Short. We do have questions. Councilor McCabe.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I'm just curious about if we could, it feels like we need the cost estimates before we approve this. Like, could we do it in reverse? Like, get the cost estimates and then Like, I don't have any objection to the direction of this. I just find it a bit odd that we don't have the cost estimates prior to approving those. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I can answer the first part, and then I don't know if Craig wants to add to it on the budget process, but we are in the process of getting estimates for you guys, and we're going to bring them back as part of the 2024 budget plan and process, budget or strategic plan and budget meetings. So we are more asking just for the approval for us to bring those back during the budget process, not on what an actual cost would be for that. So if you don't like the costs when you see them, then you can not approve them.
Councilor Huonick.
At the risk of, sorry, through you, Chair, at the risk of sounding not fiscally responsible, so sorry about that, I hope that regardless of the cost, we will approve this as a council. I think it is essentially in setting an example of accessibility and equity, and one of the reasons that I can work here and that I work so well is because hybrid is always honored, and I really, really appreciate that.
Okay, Councilor Rabinovich.
Well, thank you very much. And just with respect to the technologies and so on, I wonder if part of the work that you're doing is going to be actually surveying council around what's working, what's not. I mean, one of the things I noticed, for example, is many of us have problems, getting in and out, and especially now that the voting is all being tracked. Trying to do that all from one machine is too much for, I think, folks. And so, as I know, we just went through this at the city because we have to update our system because it's 30 years old. And so there was a survey that actually went to all of councils asking, what's working, what's not. And I mean, there's a whole series of questions, which I think would be helpful for this council to inform what you actually go and try to get a quote on. So I wonder what the plan is in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, if council would like, we can take that as direction to come back to you guys with the feedback on that. I think from our perspective, the e-scribe piece was less of the component related to the hybrid meetings and more the cameras, I don't know, Tim, if you want to elaborate on any of this. Tim's sort of our in-house clerk expert on all the technology in the chamber because he was the one that got it all together in 2020. So go ahead, Tim, if you want to add to that.
So yeah, we certainly can. In 2020, when we managed to make hybrid meetings work in here, it was done a bit on a shoestring to just make it happen. We're looking for quotes right now from vendors. We're having a bit of trouble with that. But to get that estimate on what it would take to stabilize the system, the staff do a fantastic job of making sure that everything's running, but they're in here hours before meetings to make sure that everything is up and running. So we're looking for a little bit of work with a vendor on how we would stabilize that. The other aspect, Councilor Branovic, in relation to the voting experience, part of eScribe was done for the electronic agendas to make that a little bit smoother. And the benefit for voting with it is that councilors can vote regardless of where you are. The voting system in here is capable of recording votes through the microphones, and for anybody who was here pre-pandemic, it's much smoother, but it doesn't allow for voting remotely. So if council would like, we're happy to go out and look for costs on how we might improve that aspect of it. Specifically, what we're looking for with the end of the pilot project, as far as council participating virtually, and council approval that will continue forever, would be just specifically in looking at stabilizing the system if we're going to be running hybrid meetings in council's chambers forever.
Or tell some future council maybe decide something else.
Yes.
I guess, I think it would be helpful, like if we're going to be looking at this, and I'm supportive of looking at this because I do think, one of the other things that we've seen is it's made it easier for the public to engage and participate and so on, which has been a positive in my mind, is that we sort of look at sort of the whole technology piece as a package, and have that then come back to us. So that would certainly be something I'd be interested in looking at. As a total, it's sort of, well, not total aside, because it is kind of connected, though, I do think that at some point, and this is probably directed to Mr. Lochner, we should have a bit of a conversation around where we're going and how we're managing the whole issue of work from home. I know many people in this building are still working a fair bit of hybrid, and there's an increasing push to in our own organization and just everywhere to see people actually returning to the office more. I mean, we are a people business and a community-focused business, and so I think it is something that we should be striving for here. I certainly deliver that same message in our own municipality. And while I recognize that there's some HR realities that we also need to balance out with that. We all collectively have a responsibility towards the well-being of our communities, and the fact that people aren't returning to the office is having economic impacts in whether it's in Galt, in Uptown Waterloo, or in downtown Kitchener. And to a certain degree, I think in the townships as well. But many jobs are not virtual capable, and so I think that's a broader conversation that we should have. I mean, our norm should be in person, and the rest should be the exception.
So thank you, Councillor Banovic. I guess with that request of staff, I wanted to gauge council on their interest in sending back to staff that directive to expand the scope here to not only just a cost estimate for the technological upgrade, but to look at perhaps at a more of a wholesome look. I don't know if just kind of acknowledge. Okay. So I'm saying I think the one is the issue of sort of making sure all the technology works and is intertwined, I think, is one issue. I think a broader conversation, and not just a request for us to get a report and to have a broader conversation around that, because we really haven't had that around the council horseshoe. It's been more staff driven, and I think at some point we should. Okay. Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair Harris. I too would concur they're related but separate issues. I appreciate that clarification. From my perspective, there are many things that happened during the pandemic. Some of them were vast improvements, and this hybrid model seems to have worked. And as the clerk has already said, the default should always be that council can, if possible, be in the chamber, because I think that's a much more cohesive meeting. I really like these improvements because I think it makes it much easier for delegations if they want to be present remotely. If meetings go on and it's later in the day, they don't have to worry about childcare. And we've also afforded a lot of flexibility for delegations who come in and don't have the ability to access remotely, that they can have that ability in another room in the chambers or in the at 150 Frederick. So to my way of thinking, this is very supportable, and I would totally agree with Councillor Hunick that it is prudent that we see the cost, but I think this is a very necessary step forward because it provides greater access to more of our community.
Councillor Deutschman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I support the hybrid model. Finding the balance is always difficult. I know with my practice, we're now in a 4-day work week. My staff comes in 1 day a week, working from home the other days, and we have not seen any impact on our business overall. However, that being said, there is the issue of training new people. And when you hire new people coming into an organization, the best way for them to appreciate what needs to get done, the culture of the organization, training, et cetera, you need that person-to-person contact. And so we hired a young lawyer recently, so I'm spending more time in the office than I did before the pandemic. But in order to make sure that they're trained, in the art and craft of being a lawyer. And similarly here, it's important to make sure that while we're experienced and move to and enjoy the freedoms and the opportunities that are provided, and we should always make sure that we're being inclusive with respect to that, that we also have to be mindful of training new people and making sure that we're providing those opportunities for that one-on-one so people can, so the next generation of CAOs and all of us in the inner horseshoe here, commissioners, that we're able to develop the next generation of commissioners to carry on the Waterloo way. Thank you.
Councilor Hunick.
I just want to follow up on Councilor Romanovic and Chair Redmond's comments around the value of hybrid versus the value of being in person. You all know that I make every effort to be here, and I will encourage everyone to do the same because it's great fun to be with you all, even for 12 hours at a time. That being said, though, see, we laugh together, it's good. That being said, I really don't want to become an organization that again values in-person participation over hybrid or remote work, because some of us have the capacity to do both. Some of us have only the capacity to do only one or the other, and it's important to value every contribution in whatever way that looks like. So, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hunick. So we will now vote on the recommendation in the report, and I'll read that motion that the Regional Municipality of Waterloo approve the continuation of electronic participation for members of council for council standing committee meetings as cited in the procedural bylaw 22051, section 15, as amended as outlined in the report dated August 15th, 2023, and that the regional clerk be directed to provide a proposed cost estimate in the 2024 regional budget for council chamber technology upgrades to ensure the continuation of electronic participation as an option for both the public and the members of council. I would ask that be moved by Councillor James, seconded by Councillor Wolf. Please vote yes or no. And that is carried. Thank you, everyone. I will now move on to agenda item 723, the Tax Stabilization Reserve and Working Funds Reserve. I'll call on Craig Dyer to introduce the report. Craig.
Thank you to the chair. Just maybe a quick overview of the report. This is a follow-up to a discussion that the Administration Finance Committee had back in the spring with respect to the region's reserve and reserve fund policy, and staff were requested to bring some additional information back. At a very high level, we've provided an overview of both the tax stabilization reserve and the working funds reserve, how we use them, the balance in those reserves. We've identified, for example, for the tax stabilization reserve, you can see at the table at the bottom of page 2, top of page 3, how the tax stabilization reserve was proposed to be used as part of the 2023 budget process in the amount of approximately $8 million. And a couple of in-year approvals that have happened since the budget was approved adds about another $400,000 to that figure. I think the best way to describe the tax stabilization reserve is that it's a tool that council can use to phase in or temporarily mitigate one-time initiatives. And I'll just give you, two examples of how the TSR has been used successfully in the past. The first is with respect to paramedic services. And I think for each year, for probably 6 or 7 years now, there have been service expansions for paramedic services approved as part of the budget. And one of the interesting things about provincial funding when it comes to paramedic services is that there's always a 1-year lag when a new service level is introduced. And so rather than having to tax for more than we need to in a given year, council has, on an annual basis, used the tax stabilization reserve to essentially provide us, I don't know, you could call it bridge financing, you could call it a stopgap measure, until that 50% provincial subsidy comes into force, which is the following year. And we've used that now successfully for many years. The other example, which touched on earlier today, is with respect to fuel prices. So in the 2023. In the 2023 budget, we had a significant increase in the price of fuel. And so what was approved as part of the 2023 budget, our fuel budget, say in the area of $1.69, $1.70 a liter. But we used the tax stabilization reserve to essentially phase in that increase should it happen. So we budgeted at what we thought was the most appropriate level. We used the tax stabilization reserve to phase in that increase over a couple of years. And if the price didn't go that high, then we actually wouldn't need all of that tax stabilization reserve funding, which is the situation, you know, we find ourselves in now. So it was a very helpful tool for council to use in order to mitigate the tax impact of what was a significant fuel price increase in the 2023 budget. The second reserve that we've outlined here is the working funds reserve, basically a reserve that we use to help just from a cash flow management perspective. And this is largely because the region's tax levy, so the tax billing is done at the local level, taxes are collected and then remitted to the region over 9 payments starting on the 1st of April. So over the first 3 months of any given year, our cash flow is a lot tighter. The working funds reserve just gives us a little bit of comfort, if you will, and a little bit of flexibility in order to manage through those first 3 months of the year. Importantly, neither of these reserves has a source of funding as part of the budget. So there's no budgeted transfer that happens into these reserves. The only source of funding for these reserves is to the extent that surplus from the previous year is available in any given year. And that's set out in our surplus policy, which is also captured here in the report. So, Mr. Chair, I hope that's helpful, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Sure, and there is one right now. Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, and what an excellent explanation, Craig. Can you tell us, now I know in the years when we've been waiting for an ambulance to be paid for by the province, how much did we have to upfront for the ambulances? I think it was more than one, so. Just ballpark. I think people need to understand how much we're having to take out of that reserve to cover off for the year before the province pays.
Yep. So through the chair, the funding we use from the tax stabilization reserve is predominantly for the operating cost. So to the extent that new ambulances are required in a given year, the province doesn't actually fund the cost of the ambulances. Okay. The province will fund the amortization of that cost over a period of time. So when we have to buy new ambulances, we look to the ambulance reserve, and it's our source of funding to pay for ambulances on an ongoing basis. In terms of the amount that we used in the 2023 budget for paramedic services, so I'm just checking the numbers here, looks like approximately $2.7 million, because that's essentially phasing in 2 years of ambulance expansion in any given budget year.
Okay, so that's an example of how we use money up front. That's all I know.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Councillor Deutschmann.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Dyer, the report would be more helpful for us if we were able to see, let's say, 5 years past history of use with respect to the fund. I appreciate the anecdotal comments and that you've provided, but it doesn't really tell us what the actual numbers are in terms of usage through the years. Because, for example, you note the fuel price increase phase in of 3.5 million in your, but then in the previous report we just heard we may not even need to use that. So this leaves, rather than an 8.3 commitment, it could very well be a 4.8 commitment. So, and similarly with respect to the working reserve fund, because a lot of this came out of a comment you had made some time ago saying that maybe for example, the working reserve fund, $10 million, was a number that could be reviewed and may not have to be that high. So this is why we're actually wanting to take a look at this. So it would be helpful to have 5 years past usage so we can see as a council what actually has been used and how far it's gone down and how far it comes back up. The other thing I just wanted to point out in your report, I don't believe anyone has suggested that this was to be a sustainable approach with respect to budget, but rather when we're in extraordinary times, as you described the 2023 budget process, we were looking for extraordinary measures, and this might be one of them, was to use a reserve to help at that particular time, not on an ongoing sustainable basis. So I would like to see more with respect to this, and then still leave this up for discussion at a future date. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Shantz.
Thank you. I think reserves are important to be fiscally prudent. We don't know what's coming. COVID is one example of something that hit us when we weren't expecting it. And we were lucky enough to get some support from other levels of government, but we don't know what's out there. I'm thinking that 25 million is less than 2% of our budget, but could you clarify how much of the budget the 25 million represents, please?
Through the chair, so I guess depending on which figure that we're using, so if 1% on the overall regional budget is about $7 million, then 25 million would be about 3.5%. But I'm not sure if I'm answering the right question.
No, of our total, how much of our total budget is the 25 million, not how much of it is?
Oh, I see. So 25 million relative to the 1.5 billion. So I can do that math and send you the number. I don't want to try it off the top of my head because I'll probably get it wrong. It's right.
Okay, thank you. That report was being received for information. Item 8, the information and correspondence. You'll note that tracking list for your information. Item number 9, other business. I would like to call upon Rod Regier for a new business item. Mr. Regier.
Thank you, Chair Harris. I'm really delighted to introduce Regional Council and the community to Graham Welsh, who's our new Regional Solicitor and Director of Legal Services. Graham is joining us from the city of Mississauga, so apologies to the city of Mississauga. He's got lots of experience in planning matters, corporate law, and human resources law. I'm also excited that he's spent a couple of years living and working here in the Waterloo region with BlackBerry, and so he's got some really interesting corporate experience in that context. He was excited about the prospect of returning to a highly innovative and creative community, and so I'm delighted to have him join our team this summer. So welcome, Graham.
Graham, welcome to the Waterloo region. It's great that we have you. I will go back to the delegation. Nate Whelan of Cambridge we've received a delegation for an addendum agenda. Mr. Whelan, we did commence at 9. We called upon you to speak. You were not here, so we've moved on to the agenda. This is the end of the Finance Committee now. So we will entertain or afford you an opportunity to come and speak to Council. Of course, we have passed that report that you will speak to. We have asked staff to come back and be here, even though they had departed because your absence was noted earlier. So if you want to come and speak again to the report, he's speaking to the Region of Waterloo Emergency Management Bylaw and Emergency Response Plan adoption and approval. I would remind you of the rules for delegations, and you have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you so much, Chair Harris, for coming back to me. I was used to another committee format where I think delegations come a little bit later, so I'll note that for next time. Like you mentioned, my name is Nate Whalen. I'm a resident of Cambridge, and I'll just focus my time really on the financial update. As we think about the budget that's coming into 2024, some things that you might want to think about as we enter into that time period. About 6 months ago, I ended up doing 3 different Freedom of Information requests with the region in order to get more information on how do we actually take a next level view to the budget, because if you take a look at what you're provided, it's quite high level. The public is provided basically what you're provided. It's very high level. So I tried to figure out, how do we actually crunch the numbers so that we can come up with some different ways that we can solve for some of the budget gaps, considering that the reality is that people cannot afford to live right now, right? I think that you all know that. There's a study, BMO did a study just not too long ago that said 1 in 2 people in Canada have less than $200 to their name to live. Last year, our property tax increase on a per household basis was over $100. So when we think about, and just at this level, and we have more than one property tax that we have to pay in this region, as you know. A few other notes that I just want to talk about maybe before a couple of solutions. In the past 5 years, so from 2018 to 2023, we added 375 regional employees. So that's a 9% increase, and that's a 13% faster than the region's growth. Our operating expenses, when we back out the social support payments, because that's really a direct flow through, so when we back that out, we've increased our operating expenses by $68 million, and that's $44 million incremental to what a normal inflationary increase would be. And our capital spending is up $104 million from 5 years ago. Our taxation, as a result, is up a whopping $190 million, or 37%, which is more than double the CPI rate for the same amount of time of 17.66%. So when you think about that, we really need to figure out how do we get our operating expenses under control, and how do we make sure that we, in 2024, do not continue to make Waterloo Region more expensive versus, Peel Region, versus the City of Toronto, versus other neighboring municipalities. We're actually in the bottom quartile in terms of tax rate affordability. So what are we going to do about it? So number one, I think we need to improve the financial governance. I think when we take a look at, for example, we only provided budget year over year. So if you look at the budget, it says budget this coming year, budget last year. However, just as an example, in 2022, the Regional Waterloo Airport had a $2.8 million variance, and in 2021, they had a $1.5 million variance on their user fees. That's a 20 to 30% in 1 year and a 70% or so in another year variance. And I understand there's lots of reasons for that. However, when you're taking a look at the budget, how do you know whether the budget number is an appropriate amount? I think that's actually a good thing for you to do. Just asking for giving you the actuals of what was spent in the previous 2 years, side by side with each budgeted amount, I think will help you make better decisions. The second thing is that capital spending is obviously too broad and overestimated. If you take a look at the report that's there today, when you look at the amount for an excavator, they have just increased it. It's obviously a very round number. They've increased each one by $200,000, and now you come up with like almost $1 million extra increase. It doesn't feel as accurate as it could be, considering that the law says we actually have to match the number at the top, the number at the bottom, so that we don't borrow as a municipality. I think that's really important. The next piece that I think that you need to take a look at an organizational review. And we have 4,668 employees for about 650,000 people. The region of York has about 4,400 employees for about the same number of people. And the region of Peel has double the number of population, however, just only about 300 more employees than us. So there's probably something there from an organizational review perspective. And just a very specific example, today we approved a new Ready advisor to be added to a specific team, right? So I remember the LGBTQ2 plus community.
30
thank you. I understand that there's an important role to play from an inclusion and diversity perspective. However, when we add one specialist to a small team like that, what ends up happening is we make inclusion and diversity that person's job, where really it should be everyone's job. So I'm not sure if it's necessarily the appropriate use of spend on a non-essential employee at a time like this, and I don't know if it necessarily achieves the outcome. And the final thing is Grand River Transit. I will send you all an email with more detail about some of the stuff that I've uncovered, but there's definitely some more work to do on the financial side that I think if you double click on it, we'll have a better outcome this year. So I'll send you an email after this. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming in today. I will go back to Councilor McCabe because I know she wanted to chime in on a previous other business item that didn't get a chance to. So Councilor McCabe.
Yeah, thank you. I was in the queue and then it popped back out. So thank you. I had a question of Craig and his team about carbon budgeting. The question is I'm curious to know if the region is looking at if we started any work around carbon budgeting. I know that the city of Edmonton, I think they're further ahead than the city of Toronto. The city of Waterloo is starting to look at it. It's a very complicated process where we're trying to measure, embedded carbon as well as carbon, and as it relates to different projects that we're funding. And so I'm just really curious about, particularly since we're coming up to our next budget, and then we're in the process of working through our strategic plan, and the business plans, if to complement those big pieces of work that I'm wondering if the region has started to look at carbon budgeting as something that it can bring to council so that we, when we're making decisions, have options or understand, if it's a project has a couple of options, like option X costs this and will emit or embed this much carbon. Option Y costs this, maybe it's more, maybe it's less, and would emit presumably less carbon. Just wondering if that work's been being contemplated or started, or where it might be in the process. Thank you.
Mr. Regier.
Thank you, through you, Chair Harris. This is a significant body of work which is currently underway at the region. I am not sure if Danielle DeFields or Megan Eastwood are online, but they can speak to it. If not, we can certainly send a quick email back to council on the details of the work underway. We do intend to bring back a report to council on this later this year, so stay tuned for more information. But certainly there's quite a bit of work underway on this front.
It looks like we got a couple of quick questions. Councillor Craig.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just very quickly, maybe a comment about the delegation. Mr. Whalen's come here. He's made a number of, I think, interesting comments about ways of looking at things, and we're just letting it slip by. I don't think we should. And I'd like to hear more, and perhaps at some point from Mr. Dyer, a reflection on those comments, and if in fact there are, and I don't want to put the delegation in a position of being criticized, but maybe a commentary about if in fact that is a correct way or a better way, or is it an accurate way of looking at things? Because this just slips by. We're all sitting here, we go on to the next item. I don't think we ought to be doing that. I want to thank Mr. Whalen for his efforts here today.
Well, that's a question directed at Mr. Dyer.
Well, I don't want to put Mr. Dyer on the spot either, but I'm just wondering if in fact he could make a comment in memo to us about Mr. Whalen's commentary of how to look at things. It doesn't have to be lengthy, okay? I believe in brief memos, okay? Thank you.
Okay, Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair Harris. I too had a question related to the delegation, but it was of staff, which is why I waited for the delegation to sit down. And it is to Mr. Dyer, and what I heard was a reconciliation between projections and actuals. And my recollection is that is always part of the budget briefing, and that it would be available to the public. So I would be interested at some point in time to know the nature of your FOI requests in case it was something that could be shared publicly and isn't. And just really quickly, the carbon budget that I know Rod referred to, they're very, very valuable, but it does occur to me that we also have to look at the macro, because as much as there's been comments made about the pollution that is evident with airports and busy airports like ours, that I think would have to be weighed against sitting on the 401, stalling out, or going to Hamilton to take flights. So I don't think people are going to stop flying. So I would hope that that kind of cost is also weighed with being able to fly out locally.
And on that note, I am looking forward to flying out at YKF on Thursday morning. So the next Administration and Finance meeting will be held on September the 12th, 2023. I would like to ask for a mover of adjournment. Councilor Erb, seconded by Councilor Foxton. Please vote yes or no in eScribe. Liggett. Councillor Liggett, you're good with the adjournment? Okay, and that is adjourned. We will then go to Community Social Service.